Forget about the grandiose newsreels and stoic military leaders. World War II was not merely about tragedy and triumph, it represented a 6-year exhibition of human folly on a worldwide scale. Seriously, some choices made during that era make the current debates on the internet appear as if they were crafted by Nobel laureates. Welcome to the video, where we uncover the historical blunders that rarely see the light of day. Prepare yourself for a plethora of reasons to question, how did we actually manage to win? Let's delve into the absurdity. First, let us begin with an exceptionally bizarre initiative. Britain's Special Operations Executive, often likened to James Bond's eccentric relatives, who opted for gadgets made from actual refuse, devised explosives cleverly disguised as horse manure. The tactical genius lay in the fact that no one thinks twice about a random pile of dung situated near a checkpoint or along a supply route. To continue, do take a moment to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below to share where you're tuning in from. Imagine the meticulous testing phase. Jenkins evaluated the authenticity of this explosive equine excrement on a scale from 1 to steaming fresh. The strategy included agents casually deploying these fecal explosives. Fortunately for everyone involved, especially the agents assigned to manage these devices, Operation Brown Surprise, a title I just coined, but it fits perfectly, never achieved widespread deployment. Likely due to logistical complications or perhaps the sheer overwhelming gross factor finally registering with the higher-ups. Second, forget about bombers. Japan resorted to using paper balloons. Indeed, thousands of Fugo balloons constructed from mulberry paper and filled with hydrogen were launched carrying incendiary and anti-personnel munitions. The ingenious scheme hinged entirely on the jet stream to transport these flimsy devices across 5,000 miles of ocean aimed at igniting American forests and instilling terror in the populace. It was akin to attempting to win the war through the world's most hazardous atmospheric lottery. Most of these balloons predictably disappeared into the ocean. A handful made it to North America, resulting in tragic fatalities in Oregon. However, as a strategic weapon, it turned out to be a costly, ineffective, paper-thin fantasy that primarily fed marine life and puzzled meteorologists. Third, the British Secret Service, evidently operating under a different reality, seriously entertained the notion of chemically feminizing Adolf Hitler. The goal wasn't to murder him but to metamorphose him, sneak estrogen into his meals. They genuinely speculated that making the Führer biologically more feminine might diminish his notorious hostility, perhaps steering him toward diplomacy, or at the very least granting him a higher singing voice for those impassioned speeches. Putting aside the monumental task of altering the diet of the world's most paranoid dictator, the entire idea rested on a profoundly strange and scientifically questionable grasp of hormones and personality. Would a slightly more estrogen-influenced Hitler have simply called everything off? Fourth, not wanting to lag behind in the astonishing animal weaponry department, the United States invested heavily in Project X-Ray, the Bat Bomb. This was not a device from a comic book. It was a legitimate military initiative. The plan affixed tiny custom-designed napalm bombs with timers onto millions of Mexican free-tailed bats. Chill the bats into a state of hibernation. Load them into specialized canisters. Drop these canisters over Japanese cities at dawn. As the bats warmed up, they would take flight to roost in the eaves of Japan's predominantly wooden buildings and then ignite, resulting in widespread chaos and flames. Testing validated the concept when the armed bats escaped during trials and promptly set the American testing facility ablaze. A fiery, furry nope from Mother Nature herself. Fifth, Nazi Germany's Lebensborn program was not merely morally abhorrent, it was scientifically ludicrous. Led by Heinrich Himmler, the SS established specialized homes where women considered racially pure were encouraged or coerced to bear offspring with SS officers. They genuinely believed they could selectively breed a master race of perfect Aryans as if they were creating a new lineage of show dogs. This completely disregarded the immense impact of environment, culture, education, and the sheer intricacy of human genetics beyond superficial qualities like blonde hair or blue eyes. It was a grotesque illusion built on hatred and pseudoscience, doomed to fail from the outset. Sixth, the Soviet Union's ill-fated attempt at canine warfare revolved around anti-tank dogs. These dogs were trained often through starvation to connect food with the areas underneath tanks. They were fitted with explosives designed to detonate upon contact with the tank's hull. A chilling idea made exponentially worse by a disastrous training mistake. They mainly utilized familiar Soviet tanks for their practice. In the harrowing confusion of actual combat facing off against loud and unfamiliar German panzers, the dogs often reverted to their prior training, rushing toward the familiar scent and form of Soviet tanks, leading to catastrophic self-inflicted casualties. A desperate and brutal strategy undone by shockingly poor execution. 5. A quick differentiation between a friendly aircraft and an enemy one darting toward you at 300 miles per hour was essential. The solution from the US military was playing cards. Specialized decks were created featuring silhouettes of various Axis and Allied aircraft. While it might have served as a marginally effective memorization aid during downtime, think about trying to refer to your deck in the heat of a frantic dogfight. Just a moment. Luftwaffe Ace. Is that the Messerschmitt Bf 109 on the Queen of Hearts, or the Focke-Wulf 190 on the Jack of Clubs? Let me quickly sift through this. This seems somewhat less effective compared to rigorous training and instant visual identification under intense stress. 8. The Germans, at times, experts in deception, constructed an intricately designed decoy airfield in Holland using wood. Wooden planes, wooden hangars, and even wooden trucks, all intended to mislead Allied reconnaissance and divert bombers from genuine targets. British intelligence, however, was not deceived at all. Their reaction was not to bomb the decoy repeatedly, but to inflict the ultimate embarrassment. They sent out a single mosquito bomber, which flew at a low altitude over the immaculate fake airfield and released one precisely aimed non-explosive wooden bomb inscribed with the words "Wood for Wood." The level of trolling was legendary. 9. Exploding rats. Yes, yet another morbidly inventive idea from Britain's Special Operations Executive. The scheme was delightfully sinister. Acquire significant quantities of deceased rats, carefully open them up, fill them with plastic explosives and a timed fuse, stitch them back together, and have agents surreptitiously place them in the coal piles near German factories or locomotive boilers. An unsuspecting German worker shovels coal alongside the booby-trapped rodent into the furnace, triggering a catastrophic boiler explosion. Regrettably, the very first batch of these explosive rodents was intercepted by the Germans. The outcome was not widespread sabotage but rampant paranoia. Suddenly, every deceased rat was deemed suspicious, leading to nationwide rat inspection initiatives that squandered immense amounts of German time and manpower. 10. America's Project Pigeon was no joke. It was a seriously funded military research initiative led by behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. The objective was to create missile guidance systems controlled by pigeons. Inside the missile's nose cone, a display showcased the target. Pigeons trained through operant conditioning, rewarded with food, would peck at the screen to maintain the target's alignment, their pecks physically adjusting the missile's fins. Remarkably, tests revealed that the pigeons could execute the task with astonishing precision. However, eventually, the sheer strangeness and perceived unreliability of depending on a bird's pecking instincts for a complex weapon system led the military to terminate the project in favor of electronic guidance. Sanity triumphed eventually. 11. As the war wore on and critical metals grew scarce, Nazi Germany made a practical yet symbolic shift, minting coins from zinc. While preserving copper and nickel, zinc turned out to be an awful choice for currency. It corroded extremely easily, especially due to handling and moisture. These wartime coins rapidly became dull, pitted gray, and sometimes even crumbled in circulation. Envision the confidence in the economy when your small change is literally disintegrating in your pocket. It served as a tangible daily reminder of the Reich's dwindling resources and unsustainable ambitions. 12. The U.S. Army's clandestine spraying of St. Louis and other cities in the 1950s and 60s with chemicals such as zinc, cadmium sulfide, is a disturbing example of government experimentation on its own citizenry. They asserted they were testing defensive smokescreens against potential Soviet assaults. However, they deliberately targeted low-income, predominantly black communities without informing the residents or securing consent, exposing hundreds of thousands to substances later associated with health issues including cancer. Dismissing it as mere foolishness overlooks the serious ethical breaches and long-lasting damage inflicted by this reckless negligence towards the welfare of citizens, all cloaked in the guise of national security research. 13. The Allied Ghost Army perfected deception to an exquisite level. This clandestine group, known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, employed an astonishing variety of ruses. Hundreds of inflatable rubber tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces were utilized strategically. Powerful sound systems emitted recordings of troop movements and construction noise over vast distances. Fabricated radio networks disseminated misleading information about troop deployments. Even actors impersonating generals conducted fake inspections. Their intricate deception successfully led the Germans to believe that significant Allied forces were stationed in other locations, which was pivotal to the triumph of D-Day and subsequent operations. They literally secured victories through a combination of hot air and sound effects. 14. Rudolf Hess, the deputy Führer to Hitler, embarked on one of history's most peculiar solo missions in May 1941. Believing he could negotiate peace in person, he secretly flew a Messerschmitt Bf 110 fighter alone from Germany to Scotland. After parachuting near the estate of a duke he hoped would assist in negotiations, he injured his ankle upon landing, and was quickly captured by a local farmer wielding merely a pitchfork. Hitler vehemently condemned him as delusional. The British were thoroughly perplexed and opted to imprison him for life. A remarkable instance of high-level rogue diplomacy ending in complete and utter embarrassment. 15. The British sticky bomb was a last-ditch effort for infantry to tackle armored tanks. It was fundamentally a glass container filled with nitroglycerin enveloped in an exceptionally adhesive substance. Known as birdlime, encased in metal and affixed to a handle. Simply peel off the tape, slap it onto a panzer. Straightforward? Except the adhesive was notoriously unreliable when it came to dirty, dusty, or wet tank armor. Common conditions, yet it favorably adhered to the soldiers' own wool uniforms. Picture the sheer heart-stopping terror of being physically glued to your own live, high-explosive anti-tank grenade while attempting to flee under a hail of machine gun fire. An utterly alarming design flaw. 16. Project Habash was not merely an icy aircraft carrier. It was conceived as a 2-million-ton colossus made from pyrite, a frozen blend of water and wood pulp that boasted superior strength to concrete. Proposed by Geoffrey Pike, this floating iceberg fortress aimed to be unsinkable and offer air cover mid-Atlantic. Large prototypes were constructed and the resilience of pyrite was established. It withstood bullets. The initiative ultimately dissipated when engineers recognized the colossal scale and energy needed for the refrigeration system required to keep such a gigantic ice structure from melting in the comparatively warm Atlantic would exceed the costs of steel and resources necessary to build multiple 30 conventional carriers. Thermodynamics permanently shelved this cool idea. 17. Apart from its horrific human experiments, Japan's notorious Unit 731 explored some truly bizarre methods for biological warfare delivery. One particularly outrageous concept involved enclosing plague-infested fleas within specialized ceramic bombs. These bombs were engineered to break upon impact, releasing the infected fleas over enemy populations or agricultural lands. Setting aside the monstrous ethics, the sheer logistical challenge of breeding, infecting, storing, transporting, and effectively deploying millions of delicate, fragile insects through aerial bombardment highlights a degree of desperate, almost cartoonishly malevolent innovation paired with questionable strategic viability. Weaponized itching on an industrial scale. 18. Benito Mussolini's choice to enter World War II in June 1940 was a remarkable instance of opportunistic misjudgment. Convinced that France was already vanquished and that Britain was on the brink of collapse following the German blitzkrieg, he declared war in hope of seizing easy territorial gains and securing a seat at the table of victors. However, the Italian military was woefully unprepared for extensive conflict, burdened by outdated gear, inadequate training, inefficient logistics, and questionable leadership. This led to immediate and embarrassing setbacks in Greece, North Africa, and beyond, necessitating costly German assistance, ultimately transforming Italy from a potential ally into a significant liability for the Axis. 19. Hitler's obsession with futuristic Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons late in the war, ultimately proved to be a strategically foolish endeavor. Although inventions such as the V-2 ballistic missile, the Me-262 jet fighter, and sophisticated U-boats were revolutionary, they demanded vast amounts of resources, including materials, fuel, skilled workforce, and research time that were critically needed for the mass production of proven, Effective armaments like the Panzer IV tank or the STG-44 assault rifle, as well as for essential supplies. These so-called wonder weapons arrived too tardily in insufficient quantities and were frequently mechanically unreliable, making minimal contributions to the conflict's outcome while significantly diminishing Germany's overall conventional combat capability. A victory of propaganda over practicality. 20. The American Office of Strategic Services, embracing the truly peculiar, developed a stink bomb called Who Me. This device wasn't aimed at causing physical harm, but rather at delivering pure psychological humiliation, housed in a compact atomizer. It contained a chemical compound that emitted an incredibly strong and enduring odor reminiscent of human feces. The strategy was for agents to discreetly spray it on German officers in public settings, aiming for the resulting extreme social embarrassment and ridicule to erode their morale and weaken their authority. The sheer pettiness and immature nature of this officially endorsed weapon is indeed noteworthy. 21. During the peak of the invasion scare from the Battle of Britain in 1940, the British government provided public guidance on how to confront potential German paratroopers. Alongside sensible recommendations was the surprisingly courteous suggestion: treat them firmly but kindly. Offer them tea if you have any. This perfectly epitomizes the famed British stiff upper lip and their preoccupation with decorum even in the face of imminent invasion. The thought of facing heavily armed Fallschirmjäger with a plea to put the kettle on represents the zenith of surreal wartime absurdity. One wonders if sugar was also advised. 22. Operation Bernhard was Nazi Germany's audacious scheme to undermine the British economy by inundating it with expertly forged currency crafted by highly skilled Jewish printers, compelled into labor in Sachsenhausen and various pervits, concentration camps. They churned out millions of pound sterling and counterfeit banknotes so flawlessly designed that even bank tellers would be deceived. The execution of the forgery was exceptional, while the distribution plan lacked intelligence. They faced challenges in finding a means to discreetly and effectively introduce such a massive volume of counterfeit cash into circulation with the intent of causing hyperinflation without being immediately recognized. Much of it was never put to use and eventually ended up discarded in Austrian lakes after the war. 23. Resourceful American GIs stumbled upon an unconventional yet highly effective application for standard-issue condoms, protecting their rifle barrels in the damp, muddy, and sandy environments frequently encountered in combat zones throughout Europe and the Pacific. By stretching a condom over the muzzle of their M1 Garand M1 carbine, or Thompson submachine gun, they created a cost-effective waterproof barrier against debris and moisture. This simple field hack prevented dangerous obstructions in the barrel and ensured weapons operated reliably when they were needed the most. Practical ingenuity meets slightly awkward battlefield necessity. 24. While the Allies were engaged in nuclear fission, key figures within the Nazi regime, particularly SS leader Heinrich Himmler, were deeply immersed in strange occultism and pseudoscience. The SS Ahnenerbe Institute squandered considerable resources financing expeditions to Tibet in pursuit of mythical Aryan ancestors, exploring hollow earth theories, consulting astrologers, and chasing fringe ideas like world ice theory. This obsession with mysticism and rejection of established scientific principles rooted in distorted ideology represented a significant and ultimately fruitless diversion of focus and resources from the concrete realities of conducting a modern industrial war. 25. The Japanese I-400 class submarines were remarkable engineering feats for their era. The largest submarines constructed until the nuclear age, each capable of carrying and launching 3 ICM-6A Siren attack float planes from a watertight hangar and catapult system. Their intended goal was to execute a surprise assault on the Panama Canal locks. Following Japan's surrender, the U.S. Navy captured the remaining E-400 seconds, meticulously examined their advanced features, effectively revealing a true underwater aircraft carrier. In a bid to prevent cutting-edge technology from falling into Soviet control, officials during the Cold War deliberately sunk them in deep waters near Hawaii. A valuable technological asset lost to superpower paranoia, Fanta, the well-known orange beverage enjoyed worldwide, can trace its origins back to Nazi Germany and the trade embargoes that arose during World War II. When the war disrupted the supply of Coca-Cola syrup to Germany, Max Keith, the leader of Coca-Cola Deutschland, looked for a new product to keep his bottling operations afloat. He creatively crafted a fruit-flavored soda using whatever limited ingredients he could find. often repurposing industrial byproducts like whey, a residue from cheesemaking, and apple pomace, the leftover fiber from pressing cider. He named it Fanta, which comes from the German term for imagination. This brand flourished in wartime Germany and was eventually taken over by Coca-Cola around the globe after the conflict concluded. Donald Duck took on an unexpected role in the arsenal of the U.S. Treasury Department. The Disney animated short film from 1943 titled The Spirit of 43, commissioned by the government, depicts Donald wrestling with his conscience, represented by a frugal Scot and a lavishly dressed suitor as he deliberates whether to spend his paycheck or save it to meet his income taxes. The cartoon firmly establishes timely tax payment as a patriotic responsibility vital for supporting the war effort against the Axis powers. Employing an eternally irate, partially dressed duck to preach fiscal responsibility exemplifies the absurdity of wartime propaganda. The BBC's transmissions to occupied Europe went beyond merely delivering news and music. They served as a crucial tool for espionage. Concealed within seemingly harmless personal messages or musical programming were coded phrases known only to resistance fighters. A message such as "the owl hoots thrice at midnight" or "Uncle Henry's socks are blue" could convey specific orders for sabotage, schedules for supply drops, alerts about German troop movements, or confirmations of agents' arrivals. This turned routine radio listening into a thrilling exercise in clandestine communication, operating right beneath the enemy's awareness. Finland's situation during the war was uniquely peculiar. They allied with Nazi Germany indeed, but only as partners against their shared adversary, the Soviet Union, which had previously invaded Finland. Notably, Finland resisted German demands and chose not to enforce widespread anti-Semitic measures or deport the overwhelming majority of its Jewish community, who largely survived the war. They collaborated with the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front, yet maintained political autonomy and rejected the Nazis' fundamental genocidal agenda, crafting one of the most bizarre and morally intricate alliances of the entire conflict. The renowned Maginot Line, France's extensive chain of fortifications, represented an extraordinary engineering feat designed to thwart a German invasion based on the experiences of past wars. However, it awkwardly fell short of the Ardennes forest, incorrectly viewed as impenetrable by tanks, and its design heavily emphasized static defenses against infantry and artillery. It lacked sufficient mobile reserves and anti-aircraft defenses, mistakenly assuming rivers would serve as significant barriers, underestimating the advanced German engineering techniques, such as pontoon bridges. This expensive concrete effort became a painful lesson in the failure to adapt to modern mechanized warfare. As the Soviet Red Army faced catastrophic tank losses early in the invasion, they sometimes turned to tachankas. These were horse-drawn carts or wagons, often modest farm vehicles equipped with a heavy machine gun, typically a Maxim gun mounted at the rear, which provided covering fire during retreats. A relic from the Russian Civil War, these remarkably vulnerable vehicles were tragically insufficient against German tanks, artillery, and planes. They stood as a striking symbol of the early struggles faced by the Soviets against the Blitzkrieg, illuminating their initial deficiency in modern equipment. The Battle of Los Angeles in February 1942 represented an evening of sheer mass hysteria on the American home front. Sparked by fears of a Japanese aerial assault shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, reports of unidentified objects in the sky, likely a weather balloon or flares, incited panicked chaos. U.S. anti-aircraft weapons encircling Los Angeles unleashed fire for several hours, discharging over 1,400 shells into the night sky. Searchlights flickered frantically. The outcome: not a single enemy aircraft was shot down because there were none present. However, numerous civilian fatalities and damage to property resulted from the impact of friendly fire shrapnel, a frightening and embarrassing overreaction spurred by sheer fear. 33. Both Axis nations, Germany represented by broadcasters like Mildred Gillers, known as Axis, Sally, and Japan, with a group of women referred to as Tokyo Rose, utilized English-speaking female radio hosts to disseminate propaganda targeting Allied soldiers. They blended popular American tunes with demoralizing messages, circulating rumors of infidelity occurring at home, inflating Axis successes, and magnifying Allied setbacks, announcing names of captured soldiers and urging their audience to surrender. While undeniably unsettling and crafted to weaken morale, Most historical narratives indicate that the GIs primarily tuned in for the familiar tunes regarding the propaganda as more of a joke or a minor irritation than an effective psychological weapon. Alright, can we just take a moment to acknowledge the immense level of foolishness we just observed? Weaponized bats, igniting their own base pigeon-guided missiles. It's a wonder the planet even made it through that. So do tell, which one of these 33 facts completely blew your mind? Or perhaps you have an even more absurd World War II incident we overlooked? Share it in the comments and assist us in expanding the Hall of Historic Fails. Let's curate the ultimate collection of historical blunders. If your confidence in strategic reasoning is now in tatters, hit that like button and subscribe with notifications enabled, so you never miss the next insightful exploration into the comical underside of history. History's cupboard is packed with skeletons. Very, very foolish skeletons. Stay quirky. Thank you for watching. Catch you in the next one.